Okay, attention is one of the more encompassing of the principles that we're going to talk about. Ultimately, because if you capture your attention, right, so for now, throw it out to the window. Look at the window. Right, now look at your hands. Feel your bum on the seat. Feel your breathing. Right, think about your best friend. Think about what it might be like to graduate. Think about what it'll look like for you to have your graduation gown on. Right, so you've taken your attention, your spotlight of attention, to give it a nice little nickname. You've taken that spotlight of attention and turned it on completely different things. Things that are outside the window. Things that are within your body, your feelings, and also your perception of the future and your perception of the past. Right, so capturing this attention is ultimately what mindfulness is all about. Right, so through your attention you have thoughts, and through your thoughts you have actions. So why is it that some people wake up and say, I'm going to be happy today. I'm going to have a great day. I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm not going to, whatever it might be. And I'm going to do this, all this proactive behavior. And something happens that doesn't happen. Right? Something gets in the way. Right? Anybody tell me how that feels? Why they think that happens? Anyone? Even someone that works with me. Okay, well ultimately, alright, no one, as I said, no one gets out of bed and says, I'm going to be unhappy. Right, I'm going to be completely miserable the whole day. I'm not going to achieve anything. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to stare at my textbooks for the next 4 hours, and then at lunchtime I'm going to feel bad about myself. Right, no one does that, naturally. Right, so what happens? Reactions and distractions. Okay, on this very basic level of something distracts me outside. As I say, a bird flies past, or a fly comes in, and you throw around your toys or whatever, and get distracted. It doesn't take long for something that happens physically, internally or externally, to translate into a mental distraction. Right? Something that someone says to you, and they're like, oh, nice jacket. And you're like, oh, thanks. Wait, did they mean that? I just bought this. I'm so self-conscious. Oh my God. Oh. And it just goes on from there. Right? And that's a fairly trivial thing. Ultimately, though, our mental loops that keep us trapped and keep us from being effective in the moments can be a lot more powerful and a lot more hurtful. A lot more difficult to deal with, whatever they might be. Right, but what we're doing, and I talked to you about that window of mindfulness, where you step in and you say, hold on, whoa, this is a bad path of thought. This is not something that I want to deal with. Right, I've applied a judgment to it, whether it's positive or negative, mostly negative. We look at it and say, okay, I'm going to take that judgment back, just for a second. I'm going to hold on to it, and I'm not going to say anything about the situation. Right. Then I'm going to go ahead and say, what can I do about this? How am I going to think about this? What decision can I go forward with? Ultimately, if someone compliments me on my nice jacket, which hopefully some of you will do later, I'll take it and say, okay, maybe she doesn't mean something subversive and horrible about that. Maybe it's not so complicated. And I can just take the compliments and walk on. Because ultimately, if she did mean something mean, that doesn't affect me at all. Right? That's completely her issue, whatever it might be. Right, so that's a very specific point. But what I'm trying to say is at the point of those reactions and distractions, the things that pull us away from ourselves, the things that pull us away from what we really want, kindness, happiness, efficacy, ability to work when we want to work, all of that sort of thing, are just momentary unless you make them something greater. Yeah. So, what happens when a reaction or a distraction becomes something greater? Simply turns into a mood, right? Maybe you had a bad Monday. And you wake up on your Tuesday and you say, okay, cool. I know yesterday was bad and whatever, but I'm gonna wipe the slate clean. First thing you do is you drop your coffee all over your foot, sore, messed up your favorite shoes, and Tuesday becomes worse than Monday suddenly. Right. And then you start saying things like, hey, it's been a bad week. The first thing you get to bossy and you say to your friend, oh man, it's such a stiff week. It's horrible. Right. And that becomes a mood. And that becomes a mood with something as simple as coffee. It becomes a mood with something as massive as your physical appearance, or your feelings of efficacy about your academic work, or a negative relationship with a family member, or significant other, whatever it might be. Right? Moods move over us like clouds, like literally, quite literally, they build up from simple, small reactions and become these clouds that give us a darker or more ominous outlook on life. Right? From there, you leave that for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks, it becomes a mind pattern. And like me, specifically throughout school, I did really well, did really well at maths my whole life. And then suddenly grade 10, grade 11 came along, and I started to do badly in 1 or 2 tests, and I brushed them off. I was like, oh, gee, no worries, I'll fix that stuff up, study a bit harder, whatever. Needless to say, I didn't study that much harder, right? And I started to develop a mind pattern about getting negative marks in maths. By the time I sat down to study for my matric maths, I studied English instead because I was so afraid of maths and I was so convinced that I'd fail anyway that I didn't even give it a chance. Right. Fortunately, I didn't. I managed to make it through and only recognized that had become a mind pattern years later. Right. So what we're trying to do in mindfulness is look at where our mind patterns lie. Where are your cyclical thoughts about what you think about this world? About how people think about you? About what you think about certain people? Whatever it is, where are your mind catches? What's going on? Okay. In that window where we can say, we can stop judging ourselves for a second. We can say, okay, cool, this is what's going on in my life, this is how I feel, and this is what I'm going to do about it. I've been an absolutely nasty person to someone, but I can't take that back. What I can do is go and fix it. I've been useless in my master's study so far. I've done half a page of my thesis. What can I do now? Well, there's no point feeling sad. Pick myself up, carry on.